My name is Janis Whitfield. I'm 74 years old, and if you'd met me 50 years ago, you'd have seen a woman who thought she understood sacrifice. Back then, I believed in the kind of love that could move mountains. I believed in the power of family, in the bond between a mother and her child. I believed that if you poured every last ounce of yourself into your children, your time, your money, your health, they'd grow up and protect you the way you once protected them. I don't believe that anymore, because I learned the hard way that sometimes the very person you gave your life to will hand you a knife and expect you to hold it steady while they twist it. It was a Thursday in early October when the world I'd built, brick by brick, penny by penny, collapsed under me. I was in my small, cozy bungalow on the east side of Maplewood, the one with the chipped white shutters and the front porch where my late husband, George, used to read the newspaper every Sunday morning. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon because I had an apple pie cooling on the counter. I was wearing my old blue cardigan, the one with a hole in the left sleeve that I kept meaning to fix but never did. My son Matthew had called the night before. His voice had been unusually bright, almost rehearsed, when he asked if he could stop by. "I've got something to discuss, Mom," he'd said. I didn't think much of it. Matthew wasn't the type to drop by without a reason. I figured maybe he needed help with the kids, or maybe his wife, Candace, had sent him to borrow my lasagna pan again. But when he walked in that morning, his eyes didn't meet mine. "Sit down, Mom," he said, his voice clipped. I felt a pinch in my chest. "What is it, Matthew? Is everything all right?" He slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. My reading glasses trembled in my hands as I picked them up. At the top of the first page was a heading in bold letters: Transfer of property ownership. I blinked, confused. "What is this?" "It's just paperwork," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "We're in a tight spot right now. The house. Well, it'd be better if it were in my name. I can refinance, pay off some debts, keep things manageable." I set the papers down slowly. "You want me to sign over my home?" "It's not just your home," he said sharply. "It's the family home. I've been helping you keep it up for years." My mouth went dry. Helping me. That was a lie, and we both knew it. I'd been stretching my small pension and Social Security checks to cover repairs, bills, and property taxes. I'd even taken on a part-time job at the library last year to fix the leaky roof. I looked at him carefully. "Matthew, is this about you, or is this about Candace?" His jaw tightened. That was my answer. "She thinks this place is wasted on you, Mom," he said finally, his voice hardening. "She says you're rattling around here all alone, and it's just inefficient. We could rent it out, make some money. You'd be better off in a smaller place. Maybe even assisted living." I felt my stomach churn. My own son was parroting his wife's words like they were gospel. "Matthew," I whispered, "this is my home. This is where I raised you. Where your father and I. Don't make this harder than it has to be," he cut in. "Just sign the papers." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavy. I could hear the tick-tick-tick of the old clock on the wall. My hands were trembling, but not from age. This was rage. I thought about refusing. I thought about tearing the papers in half and telling him to get out. But there was something in his eyes, cold, determined, that made me realize he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. So I made a decision. Sign. My pen scratched across the page, each letter of my name carving a wound into my chest. The moment the pen left the paper, something inside me broke. Matthew snatched the documents up, muttered a quick, "Thanks, Mom," and left. No hug. No goodbye. Just the sound of my front door closing with a thud that seemed to echo for hours. 3 weeks later, I was packing my life into cardboard boxes. The bungalow was no longer mine. Matthew and Candace had kindly offered to help me move into a cramped one-bedroom apartment above the old laundromat on 5th Street. I remember standing in my empty living room, staring at the pale rectangle on the wall where our family portrait used to hang. I could still see the faint outline, like a ghost refusing to leave. That house had been my safe place, my history, my proof that I'd survived every storm life had thrown at me. And now it was gone. I moved into that apartment and tried to make the best of it, but every creak of the floorboards, every smell of detergent from below reminded me of what I'd lost. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the washing machines downstairs and think about how easily my son had tossed me aside. I told myself I'd let it go, that I was too old for grudges, that moving on was the only way to find peace. But one night, 6 months after losing my home, I was walking back from the grocery store when I passed a new building downtown. It was modern, sleek, with balconies lined with potted plants. And in the warm light of the lobby, I saw them. Matthew and Candace, laughing, holding hands, walking toward the elevator like they didn't have a care in the world. And that's when I noticed the building's name on the glass doors. Froze. My heart pounded. Because in that moment, I realized exactly where they lived. And I knew right then and there that this story wasn't over. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to win. If you enjoyed this moment, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of my story. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. 6 days passed after I spotted Matthew and Candace in that shiny new building. And every one of those days I replayed the image in my head like a loop I couldn't turn off. Matthew in a crisp button-down. Candace with her perfect blonde bob. Both of them smiling like they hadn't ripped the ground out from under me. They thought they'd won. But I've lived long enough to know that life is a wheel. It turns whether you want it to or not. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, it spins back in your favor. On the 7th day, I walked past that building again. Not by accident. No, I made sure to take the long way from the farmer's market just to get a closer look. The sunlight glinted off its glass walls. A doorman stood at the entrance, nodding politely at tenants as they strolled in with lattes and gym bags. I stopped and tilted my head to read the sign again. The Madison Residences. The name rang a bell. I remembered reading in the local paper about a developer who'd bought up several older buildings downtown, renovated them, and was now leasing them as luxury apartments. And something about that stuck with me because one thing I knew for sure was that developers like that never held onto their properties for long. They bought, they upgraded, they sold for a profit. Which meant, one day the Madison would go up for sale. And if I played my cards right, I could be the one holding the winning hand. But I didn't have money. Not the kind it would take to buy an entire building. At least, not yet. So I made a plan. Started small. I went back to the public library where I'd worked before, part-time, shelving books and running the checkout desk. I asked the director if she needed extra help. She didn't hesitate. Said she'd been looking for someone reliable to cover evenings. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Next, I dusted off an old skill I'd almost forgotten. When George was alive, we used to make furniture together. Small things like coffee tables and rocking chairs for neighbors and friends. I still had the tools, stored away in the closet of my apartment. I set up a little workshop in the basement of the building and started making pieces again, this time to sell at the flea market and online. At night after work, I sat at my kitchen table and made lists. Lists of what I needed to save. Lists of what I could sell. Lists of the people I could contact for side jobs. I also made another list, a more private one, of every moment Matthew had failed me. Not to torture myself, but to remind myself why I couldn't give up. The time he forgot to pick me up from a doctor's appointment, leaving me to walk home in the rain. The Christmas he told me not to bother coming over because the kids already had too much going on. The day he stood in my kitchen and took my house from me. Each line made my resolve harder, sharper. Months passed. My savings grew. Slowly at first, then faster when I landed a contract refurbishing old wooden benches for the local park. The city paid well, and the work kept my hands busy and my mind focused. Then, one afternoon, I was sitting at the library's front desk when I overheard two businessmen chatting near the newspaper rack. "They're putting the Madison residences on the market next spring," one said. My heart thudded so hard I thought they might hear it. I didn't look up, didn't move, just listened as they talked about potential buyers, how the current owner was looking for a quick sale, and how it was expected to go fast. By the time they left, my fingers were gripping the arm of my chair so tight my knuckles had gone white. The wheel had turned. The opportunity was coming. The question was, could I get there in time? I went home that night and pulled out every savings ledger I had. My total wasn't enough, not by a long shot. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I started asking quiet questions in the right places. Old friends, former co-workers, even a few neighbors who owed me favors. I didn't tell them exactly what I was planning, just that I was looking for an investment opportunity, and if they trusted me, there would be a solid return. Some said no. Some said yes. I learned to smile through the no's and move faster on the yes. Weeks turned into months. My knees ached from the extra hours. My hands were calloused from sanding wood. But I didn't care. Every dollar was a brick in the foundation of my revenge. And then, one morning in early April, I got the call. It was from a real estate contact I'd met at the farmer's market. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Janis, it's happening. The Madison Residences is officially for sale." I thanked him, hung up the phone, and stood there in my tiny kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My reflection stared back at me from the window. Older, yes, but harder now. This was it. The chance I'd been building toward for over a year. I was going to buy that building. And when I did, Matthew would be living under my roof again. Only this time the terms would be mine. If you want to hear how I walked into that real estate deal and shocked everyone, including my son, you'll want to stick around for the next moment. When you've spent as many years as I have being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated, you learn that sometimes the best power you can hold is silence. I didn't tell a soul. Not my neighbors, not my knitting group, not even the few friends who'd helped me raise money. What I was about to do. The fewer people who knew, the better. The morning of the showing, I put on my good navy dress, the one with the pearl buttons. I brushed my hair until it shone silver and pinned it back neatly. This wasn't just a meeting. It was my declaration to the world that I was not a woman to be pitied. When I walked into the Madison Residences, the air smelled of polished wood and expensive cleaning products. The realtor, a tall woman named Marjorie, looked at me with polite curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked, as though I might have wandered in by mistake. "Yes," I said, holding her gaze. "I'm here to see the property. And I'm a serious buyer." She blinked, then nodded. "Of course. Right this way." We walked through the building together, her heels clicking on the marble floors. She talked about square footage, occupancy rates, potential rental income. I listened, but in my mind I was picturing something else. Matthew carrying his groceries up these very stairs. His key unlocking a door that technically belonged to me. When she asked if I had questions, I smiled. "Just one. How soon can I make an offer?" She hesitated. "The seller is entertaining offers now, but I have to be frank. It's going to be competitive. We already have interest from 2 investment firms." Then I'll be ready, I said. The next week was a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. I pulled every dollar I had from savings. My investors, those friends and acquaintances who believed in me, came through, transferring their promised amounts into the escrow account. There was one tense moment when another bidder raised their offer by $20,000. Marjorie called to warn me. "You can still walk away," she said gently, maybe thinking I didn't have it in me. But I did. Oh, I did. I increased my bid without hesitation, matching theirs and adding another 5. My stomach clenched when I signed the paper, but I knew there could be no half measures. If I wanted Matthew to pay rent under my roof, I had to win. Days passed with no word. Each time the phone rang, my heart jumped. Then, on a Tuesday morning, it happened. Marjorie's voice was warm, almost amused. "Janis, congratulations. You're the new owner of the Madison residences." I sat there in my kitchen, holding the receiver to my ear, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what I had just done. It was mine. The building. Matthew's building. Ownership transferred the following week. And with it came the most delicious piece of paperwork I'd ever held. A list of tenants. His name was there, clear as day. Matthew Whitfield, Unit 3B. I took a long walk that evening, breathing in the cool spring air. My knees ached, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. Now came the fun part. The leases were due for renewal in 3 months, which meant Matthew would soon get a notice from his new landlord, me. I thought about what it would feel like when he saw my name on the letterhead. Would he crumble? Would he get angry? Would he try to call me to explain? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the one waiting for him to make the next move. I was holding the pen. And I was going to write the ending to this story exactly the way I wanted it. The trick with revenge, if you can even call it that, is that it works best when it doesn't look like revenge at all. It has to feel natural, inevitable, like the universe simply correcting itself. 3 months later, the leases for the Madison residences were up for renewal. I'd already reviewed every tenant's file with care, but when I reached Unit 3B, my hands lingered on the page longer than necessary. Matthew Whitfield. Monthly rent. $1,250. Lease ending June 30th. I could have raised his rent to a number that would make him sweat, but I didn't. That wasn't the point. No, I wanted him to stay. I wanted him to sign a new lease and live every month with the knowledge of whose name was on the check he wrote. I drafted the standard renewal letter. Except at the bottom, in neat black print, I added, "Property owner, Janis Whitfield." I didn't even need to include my phone number. My name was enough. A week later, I sat in the front office of the building, going over maintenance reports with a super, when the door banged open. He stood there, older, heavier, his once thick hair thinning at the crown. He wore a jacket that didn't quite fit and a look that was somewhere between confusion and disbelief. "Janis." His voice cracked like he'd been rehearsing the name but wasn't sure it would come out right. I didn't stand. Didn't flinch. Just looked him square in the eyes. "Matthew." He walked forward slowly, holding the letter in his hand like it might burst into flames. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said calmly, folding another paper on my desk. "You're speaking to your landlord." The silence that followed was so thick I could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent light above us. He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You can't be serious. You own this place." "Yes," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I worked for it, saved for it, bought it. And now you pay me to live here." His face flushed. "You think this is funny?" No, I said softly. I think it's justice. He shifted on his feet, looking smaller somehow. You don't have to do this. We have history. I almost laughed. History. That's what he called years of taking and leaving me with nothing. I know, I said, my voice steady. And that's exactly why I'm doing this. He opened his mouth like he might argue, then closed it. His eyes darted around the office, maybe hoping someone else would jump in and save him. No one did. You'll have the new lease in your mailbox tomorrow, I said, turning back to my papers. If you want to stay, sign it. If not, give notice. Either way, Matthew, you're on my terms now. He stood there for a beat longer, then stormed out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the glass. When he was gone, I allowed myself the smallest smile. It wasn't about humiliating him. It was about finally standing in a place where I could look him in the eye and not feel like I owed him a single thing. That night I sat in my apartment, my building, and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. From my window I could see the lights in 3B flicker on. He was still there. And now the waiting game was his. If you think Matthew's pride will let him sign that lease, you might be surprised at what happens next. June rolled around like a slow drumbeat. Each day felt like a countdown, not to something I feared, but to something I'd been waiting for my entire life. The renewal deadline was June 30th at 5 p.m. If Matthew didn't return the signed lease by then, the unit would be considered vacated, and I'd have the right to list it immediately. The morning of the 30th, the sun cut sharp beams through my blinds. I made coffee and opened my office window just enough to hear the street sounds, the mail truck's squeaky brakes, the chatter of tenants walking their dogs, the hum of life that felt fully mine. At 3:17 p.m., the front door creaked open. I didn't have to look up to know it was him. His presence hit like a cold gust. He stood in the doorway, the unsigned lease in one hand, his keys in the other. His jaw was tight and his voice came out low. I'm not signing it. Kept my gaze steady. That's your choice. He stepped closer, his face a mix of resentment and something else, something almost like regret. You really don't care, do you? Matthew, I said, leaning forward. 20 years ago, you walked out without a second glance, without asking if I'd be okay, without offering me a dime. You cared about one thing, yourself. And you know what? That's exactly what I care about now. Myself. His eyes darted down to the keys in his hand. So that's it. You're kicking me out. I'm not kicking you out, I corrected. You're leaving because you can't stand the fact that the roof over your head belongs to the woman you thought would never stand without you. For a long moment he just stared at me. And then, almost like the words slipped past his guard, he said, I thought you'd be nothing without me. I smiled, not bitter, not triumphant, just calm. You were right. I wasn't nothing without you. I was better without you. His face tightened, and for the first time I saw it, the flicker of understanding, the weight of choices made decades ago. He dropped the keys on my desk with a metallic clink. No hard feelings, he muttered. Oh, there are feelings, I said, standing. But they're mine to keep, just like this building. He left without another word. I watched from my window as he loaded his life into the back of a dented pickup truck. He didn't look back once. Later that evening I walked through 3B. Empty walls, scuffed floors, the faint smell of aftershave lingering in the air. I closed the door behind me, turned the deadbolt, and slid the new listing paperwork into the outgoing mail pile. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. And as I sat on my couch with the warm weight of my cat in my lap, I realized something. I hadn't just taken back my life. I'd built something no one could take from me again. For the first time in decades, my past didn't own me. Owned it. And that was worth more than rent. If this story made you feel something, anger, pride, hope, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. Because life has a funny way of giving you exactly what you need, right when you think it's too late.